Good morning to the intermediate lecture at the LA Chess Club. Today we're going to start with a game from Helsinki, Finland. Mr. Kala versus Mr. Kivi, 1949. E4, great opening move for white. Why? Bishop out, queen out, sits on a center square, and controls the center square. Black decides to play my son's favorite as black, c6. Anybody know what the name of this opening is for black? Yes. The Caro-Kann. Tramel's right. This is the Caro-Kann, invented by two gentlemen, one by the name of Mr. Caro, one by the name of Mr. Kann. This was invented in Germany in the 1880s, and it is still played at the highest levels today. The Caro-Kann is a favorite of everybody. Fischer played it, Kasparov played it. I have not seen Magnus play it yet. I'm not sure if I've seen a game. He may have, but I haven't seen it yet. Anyway, it's very solid. D4, white stakes out the center, controls all four center squares, and the immediate follow-up for black is D5. Now, what black has done is allowed this light-squared bishop to be developed immediately. White has a whole bunch of choices here, okay? Knight c3 is a very usual continuation because if pawn takes pawn, knight will take, and you'll have a nice centralized knight sitting in the center. White can also play the advanced variation. They call the advanced variation because the pawn advances. And it stops black from developing the knight at f6, which is very popular.
Similar to the French.
Yes, would be similar to the French. So there's a whole bunch of theory, and if you check the informants, you'll find a whole bunch of possibilities. I don't know if I like this one for white so much, but the exchange variation. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn, and I think black is equalized after two moves.
Because your king's open while the opposing bishop's open.
Yeah. Well,
It took 3 moves to equalize.
So pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. And I think if this is, if I'm not incorrect, this might be the Panov-Botvinnik variation, c4. I think what white is trying to do is entice black to take and then develop his bishop with a tempo. So sure enough, pawn takes and bishop takes. And so what you have is, after 5 moves for white, you have 2 diagonals, 1 bishop build. The queen's diagonals are open.
I'd say you need to...
But you do have, what is this called?
An
isolated queen pawn, or an IQP. So white's going to have to deal with that for the rest of the game, and black may key on it, because if you see the pawn structure for black is beautiful, okay? The problem is this bishop can't be developed right away. This bishop can be, and the queen can come out. So I don't know. I think that white still has a slight advantage because of the development to this bishop.
I think white needs to castle quickly. Yeah.
E6, blocking any sacrifices here at f7. Bishop takes, king takes, queen out, maybe, and start some sacrificial stuff. I don't think it's worth it yet to keep the king from castling. I don't think it's worth the 3-point differential.
Couldn't you give white a weakness now? Black a weakness now by pushing to d5?
Let's see, if you push, but then you're not developing.
Okay, but I'm just saying if he takes, then you take, that now his pawn structure is bad.
Yeah, I mean, and you could even take with the queen, force trade here, and then you're eyeing 2.
But the position is okay for black. I think it's equal.
Yeah, I don't think there's any weakness in black's camp.
Sorry.
Okay. All right, let's see. So after e6, sure enough, knight c3.
Now he can push for sure.
Well, it's black to move because the knight came out. Knight c3. Knight d7. With the idea of what? To attack the bishop? He just goes back.
So to prevent the king from getting checked. Yeah.
Where?
Also to stop this check from the queen
bishop.
or the bishop.
Yeah.
That's a possibility.
But wouldn't it,
Yeah, and then I think this knight's probably going to come out. The two knights will be connected.
but wouldn't it have been more efficient potentially to put the bishop there?
Well, the general rule in chess is in the opening 10 moves, knights before bishops. See, the problem is you're not quite sure where this bishop belongs. You actually might even fianchetto it and put it on this diagonal. You're not quite sure yet. That's why knights go first, usually. There's always exceptions to a rule, but in this opening sequence, this looks pretty normal. I don't think we're out of book yet, but I guess we're getting close. And sure enough, now your move, d5. And of course, White's idea is to open up this file, maybe start a check here.
Probably push that.
Okay, he did. Black pushed. So we have an interesting game. Very interesting game. Knight f3, getting ready to castle for White immediately. And I think this is the wasted move. Here, I understand what Black's going to do. He's going to push here and tempo the bishop, but he's neglecting his development. I mean, I would have developed this bishop and created a pin. That would have been my move, okay? Because then just the knight out and I'm ready to castle. And I like to develop with the tempo. So creating a pin is developing with a tempo.
He would just castle.
Well, yeah, he might just castle out of it, or he might even develop the bishop and take away the pin, but at least it gives me a free move because now knight out and I'm ready to castle too. I've got to castle soon because if I don't, looks like an open game. This is an isolated pawn. This has only got one pawn on it, so these are both semi-open files, right? Which means the rooks are going to be coming real soon, and the play is going to be in the center. It's not going to be on the wings. Looks like this is a wide open game. Okay, and sure enough, White castles, so his king is very safe. Knight f6, the knight on g to f6. Okay, so let's take a look. I guess the bishop's going to come out, hit the knight, or maybe just come here.
3
What do you think, h3?
or A3.
a3 to prevent the pin? Well, he might just go e7. He might even go d6.
Yeah, D6.
d6.
And then push B4. Pick up.
Well, I think he's got to complete his development. This bishop's got to go somewhere. All right, let's see what Black does. Because after castling, and this knight came out, so it's White to move, right? Sure enough, boom. Blocks this bishop from being developed so he can't castle. He can't take it because it's protected by the queen.
I thought it was Black's move.
Well, no, this knight just came out, right? Didn't this knight just get developed? Yeah, to f6. So it was White to move. White pushes. That's an incredible move.
Yeah, because it could also now White can also pin the knight.
Right. So, all right. So he's going after this bishop.
And it's a double attack.
Let's see. You're attacking this pawn twice. Bishop and queen only guarding it once. So you are trying to get rid of this pawn. It's a real problem. Anybody know what a pawn on the 6th rank is called, according to Caro-Kann?
Passer.
Anybody ever eat fish and get a little bone caught in your throat and you can never get rid of it? Caro-Kann called this pawn on the 6th rank a bone in the throat. That's what he called it, all right? And it's just exactly what it feels. You can't get rid of it. It's just sitting there, all right? So anyway, Black has put 2 on it, so that's a very good move.
Bishop takes f7 check.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Little sacrifice action because he hasn't castled yet. So you're giving up a 4-point bishop. Remember, in endgame, bishops are 4, and I teach my students, even though in the opening sequence they're probably worth the same as a knight, 3, maybe 3.2. They do go up to 4 points when the endgame starts, so try to hold on to your bishops. So just think of them as 4 from the beginning, and you can't go wrong.
Does it make sense for him to take the pawn on
E5.
E5 with the knight?
But then you drop the
Then
bishop.
do the bishop?
No,
But then you drop the pawn.
You take the.
Oh, but then this pawn goes.
Oh, I see what's going to happen. He's going to take, and then the knight takes.
Yeah. Knight
And then the knight's going to check him. Right. So
Fair enough.
king takes.
Knight G5.
Queen B3.
That's correct. Instead of this check first, developing the queen and getting a check. Besides, what you're doing is, see, if you checked him with the knight, he'd have this escape square.
No,
But then, of course, you could check him anyway, so how would you block this?
no, King E6.
With the
Yeah, the bishop would block it.
The bishop.
The bishop would come out, not if the king's back here. So, I think either way, I think black was toast. All right, she has no choice. King out.
Go back to E8.
Well, here's what happens.
Knight takes pawn.
It would be,
Pawn check.
yeah, knight takes pawn. See, if the king went here, it would be mate. Knight takes, and then the queen would come up, and you get checkmated in 2 moves. He had no choice but to come out.
No, the king could go back to E8.
All right, let's take a look and see what happens if he goes back to E8. If he goes back to E8, maybe knight takes pawn now, or rook over.
I think knight takes E5.
Rook over.
I think rook over first.
And then take the
Then if he takes here, then knight takes.
And then bishop.
And then rook takes.
And then king F8.
King F8, and then maybe queen. Where is the queen going to come back? I think it would be over anyway.
I think that one just prolongs it.
I think knight takes E5 is best.
Well, we can go over it, but he came out because he probably saw this, and he didn't want to get on the pin from the rook.
And knight takes E5 check.
That's correct.
Well, that's pretty obvious. That move.
The king is going for a stroll.
Most advanced piece in the army.
For check. Oh.
Okay, here, because you want this check, and you've released the queen to come over here.
No.
I've released the
guy's
beast.
in trouble.
Yes.
No, the bishop can take.
Well, actually, the queen could come here and check, too, but the pawn would block.
Release
Who's
that
playing,
beast.
by the way? Mitch, who's
What?
playing?
What's that?
Who's playing?
Mr. Kala and Mr. Kivi from Helsinki, Finland, 1949 championship in Finland.
Release that beast.
Here we go. It says, white must have been happy with his efforts, a sharp sacrifice to get the king out in the open, a subtle clearance move by the knight, an unexpected sacrifice of his queen is coming, an artistic mate by the knights. What more could a man want, it says.
Gonna go to H3 and then the bishop has to take.
Well, queen here to stop this check from the queen.
And then queen H3.
Okay. So queen to F3 check.
Oh, first.
Bishop developed, and you've blocked the queen.
No.
That's not.
Yeah,
that's
no.
sad.
But now you have your
fine.
you have your queen sacrifice. Queen takes bishop check.
Oh, knight takes.
Knight takes.
Knight to G3 check.
Knight E3 check. Yep.
Knight to G3 check.
Okay, so.
What's the only move for the king? You can't go here, you can't go here, you can't go here. It's forced here.
And then knight F3 mate.
And this,
And what we call a check.
checkmate. 2 knight. So the sacrifice at F7 was very sound. Very sound. But you had to be able to see queen takes bishop with these 2 knights here. The key piece is not the knights or the queen. I think the key piece is the bishop controlling the escape squares for the king. He opened up the dark squares.
These are key though.
That was actually a really nice game. That was extremely well done.
Cute too.
Very cute. Yes, cute. That's a good word for it. Cute. I like that. That was very nice. That's a good game to start off the morning with. Queen sack, double knight, checkmate. So, I don't want you guys to get off of thinking the Caro-Kann is a weak opening for black. If played correctly, and Varu Jacobian, the super grand master that I took lessons from, he plays the Caro-Kann quite a bit.
Mitch beat me using it.
But the Panov Botvinnik attack opens up the Caro immediately. It's a very strong counter for white. If you need to, I would strongly suggest that you guys study the Panov Botvinnik attack against the Caro. All right, Berlin, 1936. Mr. Adler is white. Mr. Chenazzi interesting for Berlin, 1939.
Nazi.
Yeah, Choi Nazi is what his name was. Is black. Adler is white. E4, E5, E6. Anybody know what the name of this is? The French.
Yeah.
D4 taking the center, and D5. So it's almost like the Caro in a way, except, you know, these two instead of this one, right? Now, last time white took, and then the pawn took, but you see the bishop was already open before. This time white shouldn't take because it will allow this light squared bishop to be developed. You don't want to help your opponent, but sure enough, white does. Well, wait a minute. Let's take a look first. D5. Interesting. Oh, here, where am I? Oh, yes, okay. No, he doesn't take. He plays the normal line. Knight to C3. Now black takes, and white takes. So you're getting a chance to see what it would have looked like in the last game if this had occurred. And sure enough, the same move as before, knight D7. I don't know if I really like that.
It blocks the
Well, it blocks the bishop, but I'm assuming he's going to fianchetto it and come out the back door. So he's not really worried about it. Knight F3, right away, it's sort of like a reverse Sicilian, where white controls B5 and black has to play A6. So right now you have these two knights and this bishop controlling G5, and I think black should probably play H6 because there's three white pieces controlling this square, and I think you got to keep them out because I think they're going to come in. So it's almost like that reverse Sicilian. Very interesting. Okay, but he says no, let's develop, which is not bad.
Can't you pin the knight?
And that's exactly what white heard you. All the way through time and space, white heard you, and there's the bishop to G5, pinning that knight, okay? And black said, I will take away the pin. I don't like the pin.
I hate pins.
Now,
And I don't like
bishop takes knight. What's the idea behind this? Well, let's see. If bishop takes,
Knight takes.
well, knight will take the bishop, so that's no good. If knight takes, I think you're going to get your check over here, maybe.
Oh, knight takes. Knight takes bishop. I mean, knight takes knight, and then
You could also
H7.
just
No, the bishop could.
castle and let the.
Well, it's very interesting, and I've played this move also before. Black takes with the pawn to open this up to immediately take the G file, so if white castles on the king side, you have immediate pressure along the G file.
But that is not white's only option.
but it could also castle.
Knight back to block the G file in case the rook comes over. I like that move.
But you already.
C6. I think too many pawn moves for black in the opening. How many?
That's a
But the
terrible.
king's really safe in the center.
Yeah, so far.
I would have played B6.
I'd say the
Played
black
bishop
king
C6.
seems smothered.
E2, so it looks like white's going to castle on the king side.
It's really pretty.
I think B6. For black.
Queen B6, attack the pawn.
No, okay, the queen goes there. That's okay.
There's nothing wrong with that. And Queen D2, I guess what white is saying, go ahead and take the pawn. I'm going to castle king side, so you can't take my rook. And if you can't gobble up any more pawns, and it's worth it to me to open up the B file on your queen. Go ahead. And, would you take this pawn now, knowing that white's going to castle and bring the rooks over and come after your queen?
But he didn't.
Heck no.
That's right. Heck no is probably the correct answer.
But he didn't.
Interesting. Same pawn trying to open up the file, I guess. If pawn takes, I think bishop will take, and you're going to I F2, right? With a battery.
So you don't think.
But
No,
shouldn't you
you just
right
let
now?
you just let him take
Yeah,
the
just
pawn.
let
You
him.
take.
Ooh, look what white does.
He goes queen.
He castles queen side. Obviously, you can't take because the king's protecting. But it looks a little dicey for the white king with the
Yeah.
queen already here.
Yeah.
Why would he do that?
Double rook and the rook and queen back.
I guess he's going to bring this over and try to come right down the center because he hasn't castled yet.
I might take. C5.
Wow.
I mean D4. If I were black, I would take on D4.
Sure enough, the rook takes the G file, but there's no point to do, well, although this is semi-open file,
We go to the 4.
the king had already castled that way. I might have just maybe waited and castled queenside and doubled the rooks and come down the center.
I'm taking up the pawn on D4. I want to try to trick.
Okay. Sure enough, king to the E file, semi-open file, getting ready to come right for the king, so that makes sense. Knight to F8. I think what he's going to do, he's going to close. Why would he close this file, though?
Because he wants to get to F4 with his rook. I mean, with his knight.
Okay, excuse me. Hi, I'm right in the middle of a lecture. What's going on? Okay, thank you. That was Andy. He's playing the tournament out in Ontario.
I think black wants to move his king to the king's side. So he's,
Well, I see. So bishop out, and he's going to castle queenside.
that's also possible.
All right. So knight F8, though. I see. To get the bishop up, so he can castle queenside. Maybe that was the only place to put the knight. Yeah, looked like that was the only place to put the knight, so he could get the bishop out, castle queenside. That would make sense. Okay.
Knight F6 was okay.
Knight in. So what he's saying is, come and take this pawn. Interesting. I guess he wants to open files. Black takes this pawn. Knight takes.
But then once the knight moves, it has a battery on an open file.
I see that black king stuck in the center. Look at how white has centralized his rooks and his queens,
Right there.
and coming right down on the king. I mean, it's amazing that this king is stuck in the center. I mean, just look. You can just see the problem for black.
Yeah, but if
Castle
you
already.
How can he do it? He's got to get the bishop up to do that, right?
D7. Bishop D7.
Well, pawn attacks the knight. Aha! Now, you want to open up the E file because the king hasn't castled yet. So what would be the logical move for white?
Knight F6.
knight
Because if the pawn takes, now all of a sudden you have an open file. You're sacrificing a knight for a pawn, right?
I wouldn't take it.
Also, he could pin the
Well, he took it,
I would just accept the pawn loss. Also, it would straighten out my.
and here's your check.
Do it.
Now, if the bishop takes the knight for free, you're going to have a discovered check,
No, bishop B5 is mate.
and this would be a double discovered checkmate, right? Yeah. Double discovered checkmate. Double discovered checkmate. Don't you love it? So he's in check.
So he. Wait.
Has he got a choice?
That's the only
Queen.
move.
Queen has to take.
I think that's his only. Well,
queen can take.
yeah, the queen takes, and that is his move.
And then I see the next move. Checkmate into Queen D8 double X.
Queen takes knight.
Queen D8 double X clamp.
Yep.
And
So he has no choice but to take the queen.
And then bishop B5 mate.
And bishop b5, double discovered checkmate.
We still get our way. I wouldn't take the pawn on F5.
What's your rating now, Tramil?
1543.
Oh no, you're way underrated. You're playing. That's more like a 2000 call. That's you should be playing more tournaments. Yeah, no, you're playing like expert level. Oh, and I saw Kofi the other night. He said to say hi.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of like a smothered mate almost. In a way. He has nowhere to go.
That was a fun game. What was the problem with black? He didn't do what early? Guys, if you don't castle early, this is what's going to happen to you. And you could just see that the sacrifices were coming the way that the rooks and the queen were lined up on the central files, you know, and the other one was. All right, Master Ruben is in the house. and he will be taking over. So let me turn it over to Master Ruben. Come on. I'm changing the guard. Here you are.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's okay? Morning, class. This morning I would like to show a game I played just recently, July 23, 2016, against National Master Alberto Bart Navarro and Porto Ranch Invitational one-day tournament. The title of this game is Every Move Needs to Have a Purpose. Okay? Every move needs to have a threat. It needs to contain an idea so you don't waste time. Okay? Time is very important in a game of chess. And here is one of the main game that will show you that how important it is at tempo. I am white. Opponent play French. See, the first move, the main line will be playing d4. Am I right? How many of you play e4 against the French? And your second move should be d4. But I'm always an original, so I play knight f3 here. But, you know, it's not bad. It develops a piece, actually. All right? d5. Instead of d5, he played c5. The correct move probably is d5, trying to get back into the French defense. But I also have a prepared line against that French. Instead, he opted for the Sicilian. c5. 2 pawn moves, 1 out. My next move, what should be, if time is very important in chess?
Night out.
Knight out again, knight c3. So you will notice in most of my game as white, I bring my knight out very early on, and this is no exemption. So knight c3, now we have 2 against 0 for black. That means we have the advantage of time or development. That's very important in chess. So here, you notice that black has been playing too many pawn moves. The next move, he tried to clarify the issue in the center with d5. Now, here is a logic. I believe it's illogical. It's only me. Because you cannot open the center if your pieces are not fully developed or out. So here, white's next move. Can you give me a move here? Guess a move. e5?
No, bishop e5 check.
Bishop b5 check is playable. It's probably transposed, but this is more direct. E text with the same idea like yours. This is force, and now bishop b5 check. Every move contains a threat, an idea, a purpose, a plan. Now here, it's a dilemma for black how to block the check.
So with the knight.
Knight c6 is the correct one, but what's going to happen if, for example, bishop d7?
Queen. Queen goes to d2.
Queen e2 check, and then however he block, we capture the pawn because the bishop is now
Yeah.
protected. Okay, very good. So it has to be the knight. What about knight d7?
Same thing.
Same thing. Knight takes d5. Just go straight with the knight, and you don't have to play the check. Okay, just knight takes d5. So only knight c6. After here, what should we play here? 95. Remember this, the king is still in the center.
Castle.
Castle, because the idea of time or development is develop your pieces rapidly and then castle immediately to safety. Because the putting your king into safety introduce another piece into the attack with possible rook e1. And see the idea here? Every white piece is doing something. Okay, after castle, bishop e6. Now, National Master Alberto Bart Navarro is a very strong player, even back there in the Philippines. This game shows his ability to come out of the problem. He comes up with all kind of proper resources. I mean, that's only the hallmark of a strong player. So, after bishop e6, to prevent the rook from gaining tempo, play rook e1. 1, 2, 3, 4. The king safety is considered development. So 5 against 1, 2. So we are ahead 3 development or tempi, right? 3 tempi up. So after bishop e6, after rook e1, he played bishop e7, further blocking the e file. Well, when he moved that bishop on e7, that means he need to make a move. If we try to attack the pawn on c5, he need to move the bishop again. So what should be the next logical move for white in this position? This is the last move.
Now 95?
95 is also playable. However, you have to consider the rest of the army. Our title is about time or tempo or development.
D4.
Peon Keta?
D4 opens another line for the bishop. It facilitates development. It brings out, it introduces another piece out into the open. It attacks the pawn on c5, correct? It opens the pile for the queen. So you see how all the pieces, white's pieces, working for increasing its advantage. Okay, so how to increase an advantage in the opening? You just try to develop as much as you can compared to your opponent. Here, with so much threat on the position, the threat here, if knight f6, we have knight g5. It's not easy to find a move for. It's not easy to find a move for black here. This kind of move, h6. Some people play h6 in this position. Instead, National Master Bart Navarro played a6. Another pawn move. Every time you make a pawn move, you have to ask yourself, is something wrong with the move? Because it's non-developing. Although it threatens the bishop, it still didn't develop a piece. So if you're white here, what should you play? If your bishop is threatened.
Take the knight so that he has to make another pawn move.
Very good. Take the knight, because if you withdraw the bishop, that knight might become strong. And there is now a tension on d4. By removing that knight, you don't waste time withdrawing. Instead, you remove a piece. So pawn takes. Now what do we have here? Here, my next move is knight e5. One he was saying long time, attacking the pawn. But the computer recommends here the best move, knight a4, away from the center. Right? It seems like illogical at first, but it does contain an idea. That will control the c5, right? And if he captures, for example, now we have queen. Now everybody is really part of the game, and the bishop is easy to come out. This is under attack, and all kind of problem is showing up in the position. This is possible, knight b6, and you have a lot of continuation. And it's very important that you make a move that gives you a lot of play in the position, or other words, continuation. If you run out of continuation, you ask yourself, now what to do here? You're in a wall, so what to do? So make sure that your position always have a lot of continuation. So after knight instead, knight a4 is the best. Knight e5 is what I played. That's why the computer. How to defend this? Develop the rook. Rook to c8. Okay, after rook c8, I capture the pawn, d takes c5. Bishop takes c5. Alright, now here, because of this rook being moved away from the protection of this pawn,
Knight a5 and knight
That-
a4.
Knight a4.
that gives you an idea on what to play next with regards to the connection of the rook, the knight, and you should see some neat tactic here that at least wins a pawn for you.
Knight takes f7.
Oh.
The bishop is pinned by the rook. The king can't castle once he takes the knight. The queen could start checking at h5. Is it worth it to keep him from castling?
I don't know about that. I don't know why we have to make chess so difficult when it's supposed to be easy. When the position.
Because the king has to stay close to the bishop to protect it, otherwise the rook takes the bishop.
Yeah,
So
well-
where's the king going to go?
Okay, just g6.
Queen f3, maybe?
Queen f3 check.
You're helping. And rook takes bishop wouldn't work. Right?
Rook takes bishop, king takes. I'll take everything that you give me and I hold to
Even
them
when
dear.
the king is
I'll
well
cement my advantage.
I don't know.
There's none here. So
Now you can go bishop.
nowadays, it doesn't work anymore to
Bishop
sacrifice.
pins knight and then the
Yeah.
other rook comes over.
No, bishop pins knight.
And
And then
Now the rook's ready for e1.
Rook e8.
rook e8 check.
I sort of,
I know, I don't like rook e8. Just king f7 immediately.
Yeah.
Or bishop e7. Everything works. Or almost.
I don't think it works that much.
This one doesn't work because of check
Because
here.
it's check, and then you're
And after here, we have after the capture and
the queen.
suddenly it becomes so muddy and actually it's white who's winning here.
Now it's close.
King g8.
Hey, we-
What?
All right, you can go back.
Oh yeah, because then
But it was interesting.
It's a back right
It's
pick.
interesting.
h4, then this will be next.
It's interesting.
It's playable, but why sacrifice when it's
Keep it simple. Make
keep
fun.
it simple. Although I have that idea in mind, but not to the that's very extreme, I believe. Sacrifice for the sake of fun. What about the points and the registration fee and all the of the shame of losing the game because of playing enterprising chess? Okay, okay, where are we? We got lost in that variation, huh?
It was a storm.
Everybody was gone. Okay, here we go. 95. This is the position. Where are we? Oh, there you go. That's the position.
What about your second knight?
Yes, I'm missing my second knight. There it is. 2, 4, 6, 7, 2, 4, 6. Okay, where there is white to move.
I break it.
Knight takes d5.
DC5, BC5. This was the last gap. The last two moves were this was the position. D takes C5, bishop takes C5, and now it's white to move. Okay, we have to connect the idea of the rook on E1 with the knight on E5 with that undependent piece pawn on A6 and on the uncastled king. Those things we have to put together.
Knight A4.
Knight A4 looks good actually. Instead, here,
Queen e2.
what's your move?
Queen e2.
What's the idea?
Attack to a6 pawn. Battery.
That's the obvious one. There is a less obvious. This is the idea of Mitch makes more sense after this queen e2. Now knight takes f7 is really strong. The reason is king takes, queen takes check. You're not after the pawn. That was the illusion. So in your chess game, you create a double attack. This is considered a double attack. This one, which is the obvious, this one is the less obvious. With the idea of the rook, the knight, and the king in the center. This is how masters play chess. They combine all the elements in a single move. And that's hard to do. If you can learn that, you're on your way to mastership. So, after queen e2, he has no choice but to lose the pawn. So knight e7, block the pin, so that after knight takes, bishop takes, there's no... but we want a pawn. Queen takes, a6. So if he finds the correct defense in the position, at least you gain something in return. This time in turn of a single pawn. Now in our level, an advantage of a pawn already is a little, give you a slight edge in the position. Question: what about the bishop pair against I have an extra pawn. My opponent has the bishop pair. The position is about, let's say, sharp, double edge. Maybe black has compensation for the missing pawn, especially the pawn is on the side. So
Well, white has a pass pawn.
extra pawn. I'll go with the extra pawn here against the bishop pair. So he castled.
Your pass pawn.
Now it is white's turn to go wrong in this position because it's so hard to find a correct continuation without blocking each other. For example, knight a4 now will bring all your forces away from the center. The king is safe and the strength of the two bishops might be felt here.
What about bishop f4?
Bishop c6.
Bishop f4 is playable.
If you got your queen back. you could-
Let's bring back the queen before it gets in trouble in there, right?
Is that a mistake?
Which one? No, it's hard here. You may get into trouble. For example,
Bring it to d3.
Exactly.
if knight d3, for example, knight d3, you block the access of the queen to return to the game. It might be trapped later on.
But if you move the queen first to d3, then it's...
If queen d3, we have
Move
bishop
over to the G file. and
Bishop-
then
Move it
goes.
to
bishop
the-
f5,
yeah,
queen g3,
exactly.
king h8, and this bishop pairs gives black enough compensation for the pawn deficit.
Actually, you could just take
And
the
then
pawn on
take and
c2.
then move the bishop to h6.
No, black just takes.
I'll just capture it.
Yeah. Well,
You become a disciple of Mitch.
Worst things in the universe.
Yeah, I know.
sacrifices are worth it.
Well, why complicate? That's the absence of Ruben for 2 Saturdays. This is what happened. So, the activity of the bishop pair gives black compensation for the missing pawn. Instead, I have the idea of knight here, attack the bishop, protect this f2. All right, so I have to go back. Queen e2. Knight f5.
But then, theoretically, don't you lose a tempo just by doing that?
Well, you know,
After you
the
come back?
coming back, we have the knight is over here. The king is on this side of the board. After we snatch the pawn, we just have to run away with the loot, okay, and go back to find greener pasture. This time on the king side because the king is there. Now, of course, black was able to generate some counterplay because of that loss of tempo, the coming back. The capture and the coming back constitute 2 tempo, right? Queen takes and then queen e2 are 2 very important, and black took advantage of it. Knight f5 with the idea of knight d4 and then bishop f5. You see some kind of activity for black. Not to mention, we are now the one behind in.
Development.
He is all fully developed and we are still 2 tempo away from development. You notice that? Earlier we were up 3, but because we snatch a pawn, we suddenly find ourselves behind in tempo. So be very careful. What should we do here?
4 to 6. Bishop f4.
Bishop f4, very good. Bring out another piece without wasting any further tempo. Knight d4. The idea of bishop f4 is connected to the arrival of the knight here, and that is to create a battery there. You see now how they are connected to one another? This move bishop f4 is not simply development for development's sake. You want to develop the queen behind it after knight d4. Okay, so now we're back in harmony. All right, now we're back in harmony. Bishop is not blocked by the queen. The knights are properly posted. We can play the knight here to attack this bishop. We can protect the f2 pawn in case of something attack here. But after queen d2, he played bishop f5. Activity, making his minor pieces presence felt. Bishop on f5, c5, knight d4. attack on c2.
Whose move is it?
White to move. What should you do here?
Right, rook
If your opponent have the bishop pair, remember, try to neutralize them either by exchanging or by blocking their activity. Here, you offer exchange of one of the bishops. Knight d3. One is your attack. The other is you offer the trade. Okay, knight d3. If he moves the bishop,
Bishop
he doesn't gain anything for bishop a7 because
Tempo lost, right?
yes. So he wants to keep and the knight is very strong actually in the center. So he decided to capture the knight. How do you recapture?
Queen. The queen, otherwise you have an isolated pawn.
Very good. Queen takes. The reason is not to avoid the isolated pawn, but to have a kind of possible attack with the idea of rook e3, rook h3, those kind of idea. You always have concepts and ideas in mind on how to continue the game. Okay, however here after queen takes d3, he played knight e6. That is the position that black was aiming for when he captured the knight on d3 to plant his own knight in the center of the board. All right?
But now the game
Transforming one advantage into another, the bishop pair
e6.
is no longer, but he have a very what we call a Tarrasch knight in literature.
Does he do that? Is
The Tarrasch knight will turn into a trash knight later on because it's not really it become garbage there. Let's see why. So after knight e6, where do we go?
Bishop d3.
Very good. Why?
So
You keep the queen out close to your king. Queen h4 is prevented. Because we prevented h4, queen h4, he tried to make things happen on this side of the board.
also
With the knight, with the bishop, with the knight.
queen d6?
So he played this move. Now tell me something about this move, class.
it's weak.
h5 with the threat of h4. What should you do here?
You give the bishop a better place to move to, right?
You could play h4, I suppose.
Yeah,
to start.
h4.
h4 is a natural reaction, but if you look deeper in the position, you will see that this is actually a mistake.
takes the knight.
Very good, Perry. Rook e5. Now you're back. Rook e5 attacks the pawn and invites h4 because after h4 it's not really a threat because you answer the threat with your own threat,
Check.
and this time of checkmate.
Oh, there's actually a double threat because if you
Yeah,
block
the
that,
pawn will be
it's
taken
gone.
alive, and there's a threat of mate.
And there's
So you
another
see,
option.
he has a threat to trap your bishop, but you answer it. This is what your opponent expects: h4, h3. You play something that your opponent doesn't expect, right? And that causes a lot of problem to any player when you play a move that your opponent doesn't expect. Because now, for example, g6 is over.
Rook takes e6.
G6, rook takes e6,
And then you win.
f takes, queen takes. So what we have is bishop.
And then you win everything.
And everything is gone. The queen will be gone, the rook will be gone, and the queen will be checked. He will be left with only these two pieces.
Do you think he should have moved his queen to b6 earlier in the game before you?
We will go there. We will go back there. We will go back to that position because this is the crucial position. After rook e5, what to do? How to defend this pawn?
It's
The trash knight.
I told you the knight is not Tarrasch anymore. It become trash. The knight is supposed to be in the center very strong. In this case, it's not. It become a problem. All right. So what should he play after rook e5? The position said, the computer said here, black should resign. There's no move. He came up with bishop d4. Let's see how the game ended after bishop d4.
Take the
Huh?
Rook takes e6.
Rook takes e6.
Somehow overlooked.
Okay.
But then bishop takes e3.
Bishop takes c3, correct. But we have intermezzo, rook d6.
Trash.
After queen g5, he's hoping that you will capture queen takes, and then he got himself h5, h4. But then again,
No, that's not how.
another intermezzo.
Trash.
There are several intermezzo here, and in-between moves.
Trash night.
This one so okay, after this, black has to resign because this one is dropped. Okay, the trash knight is gone. It became a trash in the position. So you notice that every move has a purpose for white from beginning to the end.
Wait.
Right.
How do you sack two pieces? Oh.
There's no way to save the queen and the bishop. E7.
Yeah, hit the rook so that you're two.
The bishop is here, so it doesn't hit anything. So let's go back to the position that Perry said. What happens instead if we kept the trash knight in there and find something else instead of that foolish h5, the bad move, very bad move, h5.
Date. It gives you an expiration date.
I think
Okay.
she was on queen b6 before knight e6.
Yeah, this is the position.
Right now, what should black do?
After knight e6, bishop g3, he played h5. Instead, let's see with queen b6, Perry said.
Yeah, but what if Bishop G3 hadn't moved yet, and instead,
This is the position.
Queen b6 is just met by knight a4.
if there was a way of keeping the bishop from going to G3 and then moving the queen over to E6.
Like how we can go maybe violent here by g5, but then after queen g3, I mean, it's close to resignation, I believe.
Or good tempo.
That's it. You know, when you cannot find anything you want to,
Unless he moves.
it probably will work. This move will probably work. Let's say, even class A will probably see rook e5 here, but it requires time.
He went bishop. Honey.
Even he saw it. He said 1500.
Yep. Even
So.
he went bishop.
No, everybody said. I heard everybody said h4 earlier except her. h4. You know. So, if you look deeper in the position, you have to prove that your opponent's move is bad. The reason is he has an illusion of he has a better bishop, a better knight, a trash knight, and so the one that has a better position, according to Lasker, needs to attack. That's the rule of Lasker. Better placed pieces. Unfortunately, our pieces is also well placed for the attack. So black should do something here. Maybe g6 first. Just interchange the sequence of move so that h5 will really make sense.
But then,
Correct?
but then you still take the knight.
No, the g6. You cannot take the knight yet.
No, after it.
This is the idea later. For example, make a move and then rook e8, and then you have the idea of h5. Not immediately. Everything has to be timed properly in chess. Okay, but g6 instead of h5 first changes everything, right? So g6.
E6 and black is plus equal.
All right, and then rook e8, queen d7 or queen f6.
I think black.
Even queen f6 is okay,
I think black.
right? Queen f6 is also okay.
But I think
Bec-
black is
But not
still
with the
better.
bishop.
Yeah, you take with the bishop, then the bishop will then.
He is relying on his two strong minor pieces. So queen f6 is the proper continuation here, and the game, it's still a game. It's hard to find a real, maybe bishop g.
No, go back. Like if it's if it were blacks.
That's the trap, right?
Yeah, but if it were blacks, I had an idea. I think
Maybe that would've been a better
Like-
way of doing it.
potentially couldn't you have? Oh no.
So what should you other moves here instead of h5?
I was
I only see queen f6 and
I was
g6.
gonna say that once the queen develops or something, then couldn't you make the rook go to like e8. Yeah, rook e8, and then the knight can move in tempo.
The rook e8 is queen e8 or the other rook. Oh.
Yeah, and then next move you can tempo a piece, like discovered attack.
Maybe you have to keep this rook here and play f5 somewhere along the line, but you have to protect the knight, the trash knight. So the knight become a problem
No,
here.
F5 is completely okay. Just sacking another pawn.
No, this is hanging. F5
F4.
immediate. F5 immediately.
Saxophone.
Rook takes.
F4.
F4.
Bishop takes.
You don't have to capture. Let's see.
Queen.
Very interesting, this kid, huh? He found this kind of resources.
Was the knight on E6?
Yeah, he captured. This is trap.
So what if you move the knight to, let's say, F4 to see if we could get the bishop away from G3,
Why would you sacrifice a,
and then come down?
Wow, you
with
just
the-
discovered like 2 saving moves for
this one?
Well, if
right?
the queen was,
I'll just capture Perry.
no, but if the queen was
Where?
D6.
The queen has to be someplace else before that could probably be played. Your queen b6 doesn't work because of knight a4. This is the problem of this.
And then before the bishop was on F4, the knight was on D4, so it still wouldn't work.
No
Then
one.
you'd have to move it to F6.
And so, from the opening all the way to the middle game, you see that white's move have a plan and purpose. Everyone, you notice that the pawns, they're still in original squares,
Wow. Except for 2.
except for the 2. And you will notice that in Bobby Fischer's game that he hardly played with pawns only until the middle game or end game, because he believed that it has to be piece play every time to create threats. Okay, piece play. All right. So I hope that you guys like this game. See you next Saturday, all of you.